Just a few seconds, and I think we go live.
Waiting for Kings of Meat.
Okay. Hello, meat makers. We live today for a long time. Yes, I'm at the moment by myself, but Chris is with me. Say hello, Chris.
How you doing? Hi guys, how you doing?
Yeah. So yes, we today we invite our guest from Lithuania, Rasa Nabazaite, if I'm correct, and we're gonna talk about honey. Who's is Rasa, Chris? Quick.
Well, Rasa is our dear friend, and Rasa is also a head judge of Honey Madness Cup. She took over from Olga last year, so last year she was our head of judge, and now this year as well. She's helping us to grow the competition. I mean, I don't want to say too much because obviously she's going to be our guest, so she's going to tell a lot about herself. But obviously she's also like a honey sommelier. She's heavily involved in that scene. So yeah, she's very passionate about honey, about slow food, about things natural, and she's also like really really great person. So I'm sure you will enjoy. If you got any guys, obviously we're gonna ask a lot of questions. But if you got any questions you would like to ask, just put it in the chat. We'll monitor the chat. We'll ask him on your behalf. I probably Rasa can see this as well, so she can maybe pick on it. And then yeah, let's bring her on. Let's bring her
Yeah,
on.
I think she is with us. Let's try connect all of us. 1 second. I haven't been doing that for a while. Okay. Uh, wait a second. uh, okay, I think that's a good one. Yeah. Hello,
Good evening,
Rasa.
everyone. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
I was it is pleasure to see you again because we see each other quite often. I got a little bit problem for today's live because on your uh, bio, I know you said you communicate by honey and from honey, uh, and I don't know how we're gonna do it exactly here.
Well, we will use the words. Talking about honey, yes, but also about food is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm sure we'll do our best. And thank you for a great introduction as well.
Yeah,
did
you're
did
most
we, did
welcome.
we
You're most
miss
welcome.
something?
Um, Honey sommelier obviously is the main thing that I'm here. This year, I also finished my training in evaluating mead. So very glad to have now a little better understanding of mead as well. I think that's quite important. And I do have a background in beekeeping as well. So my dad's a beekeeper, and before, because now my honey sommelier side takes up quite a lot of my time. Before I was a little bit more involved in the practicalities of beekeeping, but uh, today more again the communication side of the brand.
So just sorry, Mighty, I'm just gonna straight jump on it because you just mentioned your
Sure.
dad. So do you think that's where your passion to honey came from? Is was like passed to you from your dad, and perhaps maybe your dad has passed it on from his parents? Is that how it worked in your family? That you've been like, are you like a family of beekeepers from generations, or is this something which your dad started and you just like kind of like pick on as you were growing?
So I grew up kind of seeing beekeeping, but I think as quite a lot of people in Lithuania, same as in Poland, you know, my grandfather had 2 or 3 hives in his homestead, and it was just to have honey for their own production. And my dad, after my grandfather passed away, he kept the hives, but he didn't have any bees anymore. And then it's quite unusual as well. Actually, he's picked up beekeeping quite late. So he was 53, I think, when he started. And I just moved back home. Like a year after he had started, I moved back home after living abroad for 10 years almost. And I had already the one thing that I did mention about myself. I have a master's in gastronomy, so I have a very kind of broad interest in food, and that's how I got interested in honey actually through the bees. But it kind of, to me, honestly, I laugh sometimes. It was almost a necessity because my dad is like a very typical beekeeper. He's not, it's not a huge operation. We have 42 hives at the moment. But he's a very typical beekeeper in the sense that he wanted to work with bees. You know, he loves bees. He likes being outdoors. He loves the area where he grew up with, the forests, the meadows, and all that. And kind of the honey was almost like a byproduct of the beekeeping, you know, of the work with the bees. Let's put it this way. And so then when you have the honey, the question comes what to do with it, you know, how to sell it, where to sell it, how do you talk to the consumer? And I find this is true for so many, particularly of the smaller scale beekeepers, that you know they just want to work with bees. And then the honey is the byproduct, and they don't necessarily know that much about it, you know, as a like a single origin food kind of product we're talking about, right? So I find it always really strange. And yeah, this is, I realize that somebody out of the two of us needs to have this knowledge, you know, to have a better understanding of honey as a food product and its depth about the quality, but also how to talk to the consumers. And that led me to Italy to study honey sensory analysis. And then 3 years later, I became the first certified honey sensory analysis expert or honey sommelier in the Baltic countries.
You know, fantastic. You literally just answered my next question because I'm about to ask, you know, so you just took the matter in your own hands, and what was your next step? How did you actually achieve that? But obviously, you already mentioned you went to study in Italian register, and you took your early exams and everything. So obviously, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Because obviously, I'm not sure whether our viewers would they, you know, are they familiar with the Italian register? Why is it Italy? Why is Italy not anywhere else? And I think obviously because you went through all the process, you probably be the best person, you know, to talk about it. So do you want to just maybe mention about Italian register a little bit?
Sure. So it is a national register, which means that it's managed internally, although they do accept external members from other countries, but it's mainly for the Italian purposes, shall we say, uh, the register. So what they do is they keep track of the people who are qualified in honey sensory analysis, and they also teach them. So why Italy? Um, I think it just kind of happened that they were the ones that picked up on honey sensory analysis, although its origins are actually in France. They joke themselves that the Italian job happened. And they kind of like they built on it, you know, and they made it into a true scientific discipline because that's what it is in essence. It is a, so it's I think in that way it's slightly different to maybe like wine sommelier, which we see more like from a practical point of view. Honey sensory analysis is science first, you know, it's a scientific discipline first, and then it's you can use it for many different applications. So they are also not just from a scientific kind of the research point of view, I would say the leaders in this, but also from having characterized honeys. So we're talking about honey varieties, you know, like a single origin honey card. So Italy actually, for the size of the country, has quite a large number of single origin or monofloral honey varieties. It's because they have such a diverse geography. You know, if you go to the north, you have mountains and more temperate climates, and the south is quite dry and hot, and so on. So they have quite a big variety of monofloral honeys, and they've spent a very long time building very, very detailed standards on it. Other countries, some have some standards when it comes to sensory, but usually they're very, very basic, you know, just like a couple of sentences. The Italian standard is quite broad. So to pass the exam, basically we study in detail these 18 really, really well characterized varieties, and you have to know them, to recognize them, to recognize the standards, and obviously other quality issues, defects, and so on. Evaluating, describing, but yeah, the very basis is the 18 varieties.
So my question is, at the moment, is only Italy where you could finish that kind of sommelier honey course, or other countries create similar program?
So there are now, I think, one teacher who is qualified to teach level 1. So basically you do 3 levels to pass, to take the exam. So there's one teacher outside of Italy. She's American, who started actually the term honey sommelier, Marina Marchese. And so she can teach outside of Italy, but most of the time it will be the people on the Italian register, on the Italian teacher register, to be more precise. They do trainings abroad. So United Arab Emirates, they did one in Scotland. I think not so long from now, they're also doing one in South Africa. But it will be the teachers who are certified. So there's a separate register for teachers. And the teachers are, yes, almost all of them Italian. There are... Yep, sorry.
Sorry, because the question just popped up, and I want to actually ask something to which is going to relate to
Sure.
that question. Because I'll read the question and then I'll ask mine, and I'll let you answer. So the question is from Glad Koala: is does it mean that passing the honey sensory exam in Italy versus the USA will give different sensory skills? But my question is actually: is Italian is the only sensory program to teach people how to how to become the sommelier, or are there any alternatives in the world? Because you obviously mentioned that Italians, yes, they do allow the foreigners to go into the register, but are there any other countries which have a similar program which is as recognized in the world? Because you mentioned the Scotland started it, well, somebody in Scotland started it, the lady in America, but they all came from Italy, so to speaking.
Yes, so they're all, so the American woman is the one that she can actually teach, and the course that she teaches is recognized by the Italians. The example I gave in Scotland, it's the Italian teachers coming over to teach in Scotland. So it's just the location that is different, So if we're talking about someone else doing it, there are people who are the most sort of current example would be Germany. So Germany has worked quite extensively, and Stefan, who is also a meat judge. So he kind of led the German system. So they're using, it's similar. I'm not so familiar because they're doing it internally. They're doing it for their own purposes. So it's slightly adapted. So I can't tell you that much how different it is. The methodology it'll be quite similar, because sensory analysis on its own, you have ISO standards, and then you can adapt it for quite a few different food products. And then it ends up being just like kind of fine-tuned, let's say, to the food product. And it can also be fine-tuned to the local varieties, which obviously the Italians teach Italian honey, so the Germans, they will focus on the German varieties. In the US, they will focus more on the American varieties. So I teach honey sensory analysis as well. I teach it at the let's not say institutional level, just as a kind of a skill for people to have to know it as a methodology. So I focus again on more Lithuanian, Polish, Latvian, which are quite similar honey varieties. But the underlying methodology is the same. We have the standardized vocabulary that we use. Again, the layout of the form when you're evaluating honey might be slightly different, but the aspects, the way we evaluate them will be probably the same everywhere, to be honest.
Great. So yet again,
you work. Sorry, Chris. Can I jump?
Yeah, of course you can. Go on.
Sure.
So the work, the words, the vocabulary are pretty much same. I believe the same, like between wine and meat, which is we use same vocabulary, and we evaluate meat and wine very similar way. But advantage from Italians is that because they got that system, which is they create, and they got very good base of the samples. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if someone decide do it course in the US, because you use that example of that one lady which could do it in the US, are they gonna use samples from Italy or they use samples from US?
I think they do a mix, but to be honest, since I haven't taken the course, I wouldn't want to say with like exact determination. But from my knowledge, I don't think they have as detailed official standards for the American honeys so far. So at least part of the samples, yes, would be Italian honeys.
Okay.
Actually, a lot of the time when people, even when we do like, so the international honey sommelier community, at least the people that are in the register, is not so huge. About 30 plus people at the moment only. So overall in the register, there's last time I checked, I think 407 people total, 30 plus non-Italians, right? So very often the people will use the Italian honey, and I use it as well because we know it the best. We have the best standards. If you think that like it took them 40 years to have this very detailed standards for 18 honeys, you can imagine how difficult the process is. So now that it's growing, other countries will catch up, and I'm hoping that a lot of countries are working on it, developing like really detailed standards for their own honeys, but it takes time. So in the meantime, at least to some capacity, we are using the Italian standards.
So let's talk about the standards because I would like to understand that a little bit better. How
Sure.
they create standards? Are they because they harvest some samples of honey through so many years and they looking for similarity, or they looking for something what is the best in the honey, or both? How they work to create them standards?
So it's kind of the standards means basically what is typical for a certain variety. Let's put it this way in a very simple way. It doesn't. It's not limited to the sensory only. So it's limited to the chemistry, pollen analysis or melissopollenology. Always get stuck on that word. Um, the, any kind of other physical characteristics. Sensory is just a part of it. So when evaluating as well, we would, if we wanted to determine the variety of honey with much more confidence, we will always use all of the analysis that we can, right? So not just the sensory, but also pollen analysis, also chemical analysis, electrical conductivity, if we're looking for honeydew, and so on. So it's how it actually happens is a very long process. It is a scientific process, so it's done in kind of how do I say it, in stages, but everything is happening simultaneously. First of all, it all starts with the beekeeper, right? So the beekeeper is the first level of quality control, and when we're talking about the variety of honey, so they will think, they will attempt to the best of their knowledge and ability to harvest a certain variety of monofloral honey. Then they harvest it, they think, okay, I've done that. And then you can do a pollen analysis, you can do chemical analysis, and you can do sensory. But it starts with that first, assumption that you have such honey, but you're not actually sure. If it's a variety you don't know about, so it's a very complicated, long, and difficult process to actually get to that point. And that's why it takes so long, because obviously the more you taste, the more samples you get, the better it gets. But yes, you're looking at for basically repeating patterns in the samples, whether it's chemistry, whether it's pollen, whether it's sensory.
So I've actually experienced that, and I've seen it with my own eyes when we were visiting one of our friends in like northeast Poland. They've got, obviously they make meat, but also like the beekeepers, and that was in a season. So we also went to see the apiary, and the guy, the beekeeper, he opened a hive, he took a frame, and he just literally sampled, with his finger, he sampled the honey and says, "Oh yeah, it's willow." But also maybe perhaps a bit of like a maple or something. And I'm like, how? How can you say that in such confidence? But I guess that's what you just said, that it comes with the experience. The more they try, the more the sample is repeating every year, then they can find out those little nuances. Because I mean, I'd like to think about myself, to have a good palate, but Yeah, there's only certain amount of honey varieties. I'm 100% sure I'll get it right. The rest of them is like, yeah, it's honey. So yeah, perhaps I would like to, like, maybe, upskill myself a little bit. But so brilliant. So you obviously mentioned it starts with the beekeeper. Do you think that the competitions are useful for the beekeepers, for the beekeeper community, to help them, like, make sure that what they're doing is right, or the variety they gain? Because obviously at the end of the day, it is a bee product, isn't it? It's not much of the beekeeper can influence. But do you think it's useful for the beekeepers to send the meat for honey for the competitions?
Absolutely. And I think the very good point to start is what you just said at the end. It's a bee product. It's a bee product. It's not so much that a beekeeper can influence. Completely not true. I think we like to think of it this way, and there are different ways to do beekeeping, right? So you can be like the more passive beekeeper, where you just basically, kind of leave the hives to their devices, and yes, bees know best. So then you harvest whatever they give to you, but you can influence it quite a lot. So like most of the time, this is particularly true when we're talking about monofloral honey. We're gonna have the mobile beekeeping, where the beekeeper will track the blooming periods. They will know specific areas where to take the hives. They will track exactly when the blooming is finished, when to remove the hives. And just like the processing of honey can be is such an important step in the quality, not just the placement of the hives, but the processing as well. So from just having a clean product with no defects to actually influencing the crystallization and all of these things. So I think this is a very good thing, particularly maybe for the smaller scale beekeepers, I would say, to get feedback on certain things that they won't necessarily even think about or notice. But for me, quality is a very important thing. But for me, I think the biggest value and the biggest lack in skill when it comes to beekeeper is actually talking about their product. So I think there's also the feedback that they get, where they will get the description back with very detailed notes about the profile, is also a good starting point for them to start thinking about their own honey, whether they will use the actual description to describe it to the consumer, or just try and get into the head of how to do it, basically. But I can give you an example of that for me is very, very illustrative. So this year, there's quite a few of us now in Lithuania. As you know, we have 3 certified honey sommeliers and the fourth one on the way, fingers crossed. So we've collectively, we did a kind of like a mini competition where we selected, people could submit, and we selected specific honeys to take them to Apimondia in Copenhagen to the honey bar, right? So, and we had like this, just a very short form where people could write basic information and then some more detailed descriptions. I don't remember exactly the number of the samples we got, but it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was maybe around 80. And out of all of those, the same things were being said over and over again, like, oh, we like the area that we grow has like no intensive agriculture. I love nature. I love bees. Not a single beekeeper wrote a single thing about the honey itself. No attempt to describe it, to say why they chose, this honey is something they particularly like, if it's a very good monofloral, if it's something unusual in the sensory profile, nothing.
So,
They
So
don't, yeah.
what was the reason you think behind this? Because I think I understand your point of view, but what is the reason why people don't write the most important thing about honey beekeepers?
It's just that we never thought about honey this way. I have to say, the majority of people, um, for most of people, like for beekeepers themselves, like I mentioned in the beginning, certainly like it was with my dad, it was like a kind of like a byproduct, of their beekeeping. They're bee farmers more than they are honey producers. I like to I like to call them, So they're not so much maybe interested in it as a product, because And it's, in a way, it's very normal, because it's these are two different skill sets to have. One is to know the product, to have the ability to describe it. So it's like the same with wine. You're not necessarily going to have the winemaker be a wine sommelier. Let's put it this way, right? It can be, but it's not necessary. So it's the same with the beekeepers. And honey is a very interesting product in the way that it's universal, first of all. So like literally every country in the world has their own honey, so it can be local anywhere. And it's so universal. It's like salt. We don't really think about it too much. It's like there. We like it sometimes, we remember it more definitely maybe if we're sick, um, we enjoy it, but we don't think about it that much because nobody taught us to think about it. And the same goes for the beekeepers, like um, most of the time we have been focused in the past and to a large extent today on the healing properties of honey, on the medicinal part of honey, but not really like to the extent of a single origin product. So it's very difficult for people to understand as well. But like, so when I give lectures, I give example of noodles, you know to me, like single origin, good quality honey from a small beekeeper, harvested, short supply chain, and supermarket honey, which is like industrial mixed honey that has no more terroir, is the difference between ramen, that's been cooked. The broth has been cooked for, I don't know, 24 hours or something. Noodles, handmade, high quality products, and the instant noodles, the cup noodles that you have. So, but people, it's very difficult for them to understand us about honey because nobody was talking about it before. Now we have about 30, like I said, international honey sommeliers, and people are bringing back that knowledge. They're starting to talk, they're passing that knowledge not just to beekeepers, but we also need chefs, which is a thing that I'm working on now. I'm collaborating more with chefs. We need as many people in all of the areas that have anything to do with honey to start talking that way. It's not just beekeepers.
And to be
Right,
honest,
Rasa.
sorry, Chris. To
Yeah,
be
go
honest,
on.
I think that's also answer for many beekeepers when we got problem in Europe with the poor quality of honey, so from some regions, to push the sale of good honey, because that's what I think they should concentrate. But do it one good product, it doesn't mean you're gonna sell it. You have to know how to talk about this product, and I think that things it is very helpful. But yeah, it's lots of work. Seems like lots of work to educate people how they should do it, and I believe competitions gonna help that one as well. Chris, I give you a voice.
That's great because there's another question which I was going to read. I'll I'll take the attempt to answer it, but I'll ask you to elaborate on it more. So the question is: so if honey is the byproduct for beekeepers, then what's their main goal when farming bees? And before I'll give you a voice, Rasa, I think it's, if there's a like passionate beekeeper who's only having like, the few hives, few colonies, for them, yes, beekeeping is a passion, and honey they maybe not that much worry about. But if we're talking, obviously some beekeepers are treated as a business, as the main income, just like farmers. And they probably, yes, they will be looking to cash at the end of the season on the honey. But also, I know in America there is a lot of beekeepers who are using the bees to pollinate, right? And then like, yes, and then the honey is literally the byproduct because the main income is coming from the other farmers who pays them to put the hives on the fields to pollinate the crops. But anyway, that's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I think those are all very good points, and I would say the same. From it's either just wanting to work with bees. Um, if you look at a business, that's usually like a bigger scale operations, obviously financial reasons. Um, but yeah, in Europe, maybe the pollination services are not so well established yet. In certain countries, maybe more so, perhaps more in the south. But in other parts, but for example, in Lithuania, there's a little bit we don't have yet the understanding of the farmers of the need of the services of the beekeepers. But yeah, I think I might not probably don't have anything else to add. Very good answer.
Uh, let's talk about a little bit about competition because, as you guys know, or maybe not, Honeymead Madness Cup coming. It's the competition which is me and Chris running, and Rasa is our head of judge. We're really happy to have you with us because you give us that knowledge, which is we don't have it. But in our conversation after last year, we find out that it was lots of how would it mistakes as well, mistakes from beginning when people enter the honey. If you could explain first of all what's make different between medal honey and just good honey, and if you could give few tips when people register, because that's the first step when you actually uh, put your meat to the competition and give you chance to win. What's the tip to register great meat for medals?
Okay, so first of all, what makes good honey from a metal honey? Um, the difference is not huge, I would say, and it will depend on the category that your honey is within. So if we're talking about monofloral or single origin honey, then the most important, obviously, if we're talking about metal honey, it's a given that there's no defects, no issues with it in the quality department. But the main thing will be how well it actually matches the standard that we will expect, so the intensity, the notes, how characteristic it is, basically. If we're
Okay, okay, Rasa. I
not
would like put dot here. Uh, how people can know? Like, I can you imagine? I'm beekeeper, and I want to send my monoflora honey to the competition. You talk about some standards. How me, as a not class qualified sommelier, know what the standards are? I got my back week honey from this season and from the last season, and I think both they good. Uh, how I will recognize which one is better to send to the competition
it's a tough question.
without knowing that standards, which is you just talk about.
I think for the beekeepers, the main thing is their experience, I have to say. That goes a long way. So, for a very fresh, brand new beekeeper, it's a tough choice. Again, because partly because of what I said earlier, that other countries won't necessarily have the standards, and there aren't like these amazing standards for all of the honey. In Europe, we have at least, according to literature, we have at least 112 varieties of monofloral honeys. So we don't have amazing, easily accessible standards for everybody. Um, but the experience of a beekeeper goes a long way. And one of the things that you can do, if you want, you can always send it to the lab. If you really like thinking, if you're not sure, I would either talk to a more experienced beekeeper who knows the honey, if they know the honey, or you can always send it to the lab and you can have the pollen checked. Again, it's not 100%, proof. It doesn't mean that if you necessarily have more pollen of the certain variety in the two samples, that the sensory is also gonna have, be much more typical to the standard. But that's a very, very good starting point.
So okay, monoflora, it should be as pure as possible, I believe.
Yes.
Plus have to get nice aroma and nice flavor for that
Variety.
variety. Yeah, is that
Sure.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So
Because Mhm.
yeah. Cool.
And then for polyfloral, we're looking for, it's much more subjective. So we're looking for overall balance, how it matches also in the with the visual and the other sensory aspects. So let's say the more lighter the honey is, the more delicate we're expecting it to be. That this is a very general kind of uh, uh,
Okay.
description, but the darker it is, the more intense it can be. The difference here is that we are much more thinking when we're talking about polyfloral honey, we're much more thinking from a consumer's point of view, right? Because the polyfloral honey is kind of monofloral honey is much more niche product most of the time. Polyfloral honey is much more widely accepted. So we're thinking of from the point of view of the majority, the average consumer, what they would find acceptable. So let's give an example of buckwheat honey, right? The one that probably most people will be familiar with. Very intense, the animal, barn smell. Some people would say, stinky. We don't say that, it's just animal, right? We try to just describe. We don't say whether it's good or bad, the smell. So in a polyfloral honey, such a strong characteristic is not really desired. It's too intense. But when you're talking about buckwheat honey, it's good to have that because that's typical to buckwheat. And you will have people who love buckwheat honey for that, and they will be your consumers. But when we're talking about polyfloral, so you're thinking about this balance, about matching the light, like I said, the lighter the honey, the more delicate, the more intense the color, the more intense the profile it can be. But it's also, to me, when we're talking about polyfloral, there's also it should still be memorable in some ways. The profile, it shouldn't be like flat. You're still looking for complexity. You're looking for it should be complex, but it should be a well-balanced bouquet, kind of like a good perfume. If you,
So,
All good mead. All good mead.
organ meat, yes.
so technically, from amateur's point of view, it's easier to decide with polyfloral honey to send to the competition which one is good than which one is bad than monoflora. Would you agree?
I guess so, but here's we come to the also at this point to the second part of your question, which is what are some of the tips for the beekeepers? So I find it very often from my experience working with beekeepers, talking with beekeepers, that they very often actually underestimate polyfloral honeys because to them it's just honey. There's nothing special about it. Every single honey is special. The area that it came from is unique. So every single one will be special. Whether how expressive that honey is in that particular season from that place, that's what changes. But they're all different. Like we had this again. I return to the example because it's the most recent from the big project that we had, choosing the honey to take to Apimondia. We agreed that we will do the typical summer Lithuanian honey, and when we introduced the honeys to the first in Lithuania before we took it to Copenhagen, people were like, "Oh yeah, it's just honey, it's just it's a typical honey." But when you take it somewhere else to people who have not tried it, it's more than that. It becomes their typical honey is very different where they come from.
Okay.
So that's one of my biggest tips is do not underestimate polyfloral honey that you have. It's not just honey. There's no point to chase, just thinking that, you think you maybe collected some obscure or rare monofloral honey. Does not necessarily mean that, you did a better job or that honey is worth somehow much more. Your polyfloral honey could be just as unique and just as worthy of entrance. I think my best tip would be just that, actually, to first of all give your consideration to all of your honeys, but also to get to know it yourself, taste it. Like, does it tell you anything? Do you have a honey that your consumers really like and come back and ask for? Give it to taste to your family, to your friends. If there's something in particular that they like, just ask for feedback as well. Yeah, those are my
Okay.
biggest.
Guys, it's only 16 people watching us. I believe because we haven't been alive for a while. So it's not big numbers, but thank you guys to be with us. It's amazing. I believe you all are very passionate about honey and hopefully with meat. Don't forget, give us like and subscribe channels. That's definitely help to see that video later to more people. So thank you very much. Other question to you, Rasa. Because I remember from last year, we have that question from the beekeepers. What's the best to send to competition? Crystallizate honey or running
Running.
honey?
Okay, so there's not actually any difference, let's put it this way. As we all know, crystallization is a natural process. It happens to all honey. The only question is how fast, right? So I find it that people sometimes think that liquid honey is best. What we're really looking for is stable product, right? So what we don't want is the honey that's in the process of crystallization. And what we definitely don't want is heated honey. So if you've had your honey crystallized, just send it crystallized. Unless I mean, unless it's really some horrible crystal structure, then don't send it, but definitely do not heat it up, because we've had a couple of samples where that I suspect were heated. Because you can tell.
What sorry, Rasa, I sometimes have to stop you because you talk
Sure.
about very serious things, and from amateurs could be too difficult. What's that mean? Bad crystallizate honey or
And
bad crystal,
I'm
as you
talking
said.
more from the defective kind of point of view. So sometimes if you have, like phase separation, or you can have like but this happens when there's something wrong from the quality point of view. So you can have either layers, or you can have large chunks of crystals dispersed in the liquid, but this is if either honey is very old, it's not been stored properly, it's been heated and then crystallized again. So this usually already like indicates issues in the quality, in the handling anyway, that should limit you from submitting that honey. But in general, um, while in kind of objective terms, there's no bad crystallization, let's put it this way, right? So particularly when we think of consumer, we do have some preferences. So those are the difference there, and we will take those into account. So the consumer, as you can imagine, prefers, when we're talking about crystallized honey, smaller crystals, more smooth, um, not something really rough, irregular, that takes forever to dissolve, and feels like you've eaten what's the English name for it? The the paper that you use for buffing.
Oh, the sandpaper.
Sandpaper, thank you.
Sandpaper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sandpaper, yeah. So from the quality point of view, nothing wrong with honey like that. Maybe it's its natural, state to have those crystals. From a consumer point of view, consumer will want silky, more creamy, more spreadable.
Right.
So we do take that into account, particularly for polyfloral honey.
I need to chip in something here. So you
Sure.
mentioned not to heat treated honey before you send it for the competition. What about the creamed honey? Because it's quite common now that the beekeepers will take a part of the honey and they will put in the creaming machine, and it's usually like heated and spun, and it comes out like beautiful smooth texture which doesn't set. It's always like kind of like a peanut butter like consistency. So what about that? Is that something which beekeepers should or should not be doing when they want to send it for the competition? Because we do know that uh, a lot of consumers actually prefer that kind of honey. It's either runny or smooth by cremation. So what is it?
So competitions that do allow this kind of honey usually will have it in a separate category. So you could have creamed honey, but it would be a separate category of its own, I have to say, which we do not have. So we are only looking for naturally set honey. Uh, Again, from a beekeeping point of view, there are certain technologies which I'm not a technologist in the honey department, but there's temperature that you can influence to an extent the crystals and the eventual formation of the crystals, shall we say. But creamed honey would be a separate category. So no, please do not send creamed honey.
Okay, so you heard that from the horse's mouth. Do not send cream honey. There's a question actually in the chat, so let me just read it for you, Rasa. So, talking about the quality of the honey and its origin, how do you know that the honey that you judged was not adulterate?
Very good question. And to be completely transparent, some of the honey can be adulterated now so well that the top labs in the world cannot tell. So, from a sensory point of view, adulterated honey can be detective. It's if it's quite a bad job, let's put it this way. But unfortunately, no sensory analysis expert, no honey sommelier, and not even a single, I would think, quality person working in any lab in Europe would tell you with certainty that this honey is fake or not, just by tasting it. So that is certainly an issue. I mean, it is a possibility, but then again, we are only accepting honey from producers who make their own honey. So we're not looking at the big suppliers. We're not looking for processed industrial honey mixes. And we know from experience, we know from the data that we have in Europe wide that this is the honey that usually has adulteration problems depending on which country you look at, and the data is so mixed. European Union estimates about 50%, some countries say 70, and some say 90% fake. But again, this is usually from experience the case with the supermarket honey and not the small scale producer. I mean, you can tell if it's a really bad fake honey, you can tell.
Yeah, I think even amateurs can tell that. If you get at least small knowledge about good honeys, you will recognize, or at least if you ever try good honey, if you're gonna put to your mouth bad or fake honey, you will know this. It is this. Uh, I got other question. I know answer, but I will ask because I remember someone asked me before the chat. They can be with us today, but they asked me to ask that question. How is possible you judge, for example, buckwheat honey from Lithuania against multiflorals, avocado or mango honey from Mexico? How you can compare them two and decide one get medal and another not get medal?
Well, first of all, we don't.
Question is,
Uh-huh.
sorry, I have to clarify. Question is about honey madness, typical, because they don't know how it's work in our competition.
Okay, sure. So we do not compare. First of all, we have two separate categories here. So we have, yes, monofloral, but avocado, buckwheat. So the only thing that we would compare those two would be to the standards, if they are known, if they're in literature. We also have a list of monofloral varieties that you can submit and enter, right? And in any case, even if we were talking about two buckwheat honeys, we do not compare them one to the other, right? So we are not looking for the best buckwheat in all of the samples that were sent to us. We are looking for how well it matches the standard. Does that answer the question?
Let me,
Answer.
yeah, Mate, let me just elaborate on that a bit more. So, for
Okay.
those of you who send in meat for the Meat Madness Cup, it's quite simple. Okay, we've got 33, 36, 39, whatever categories, and we are choosing three best in each category and award medals like that. Gold, silver, and bronze. In Honey Madness Cup, as Rasa just mentioned, we do not do that. Okay, we can have several gold, several silver, several bronze, as long as the honey will meet the certain criteria, which are obviously set by the regulations, by the judges, and it will reach that criteria. It will get the medal. So we can have like 7 gold medals in monofloral category, and 4 of them can go to buckwheat because they were like 4 tremendous buckwheat honey. So I'm hoping that I'm kind of like add a little bit to the context how Honey Madness Cup operates. It's not 3 best place per category; is the best honeys are awarded according to the criteria they've met.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, there's obviously a much a higher chance to get the medal if you do have the quality honey, because you're not competing. Because again, it would be impossible to do that, right? Objectively, I mean, you could maybe do it for polyfloral honey the way that you do it in mead, like choosing the top three, but when it comes to monofloral honey, it would be like, exactly, how can you compare avocado with buckwheat or acacia? You cannot.
I'll tell you how we could do that if we had a number of categories. We have, the avocado category, buckwheat category, acacia, linden, heather, and so on, so on, so on. And then, yes, we could potentially have, whatever, 40 categories and 3 best places in those categories, in each of them. But the reality is that the honeys honey is different. Okay, it's not. I don't think we're going to get 40 different in that number that we can actually make a competition out of it, because you can maybe have only 1 or 2 avocado samples. So what is going to compete against?
It's also the idea is also to be kind of more objective, because when you're starting to compare and contrast, you kind of lose a little bit of the objectivity, I think. So the honey sensory analysis, the main aim of it is to be as objective as possible, So I think that's the idea. But even, in science, people don't always agree on everything. But yeah, the idea is that you just objectively evaluate the one, and you're not thinking about anything else. You just give your full attention to the honey that's in front of you, and you evaluate it as it is, and whatever marks that it gets, if it's worth the medal, it is. If it's not, it's not. Doesn't matter what the next honey is like or the one before that.
Okay, I would like now you use a little bit of your imagination, and if you could imagine that you got a jar of honey in front of you, and could explain how judges on a competition work.
Okay, so it works in a way, for those that are familiar with the mead evaluation. To be honest, with pretty much any food product that we're using sensory analysis, the stages are the same. Tasting part is just the aspects that we are evaluating are slightly different, and the parameters that we use are slightly different. So when it comes to honey, the most important part is the olfactory and the tasting. And I think I would say the most difficult of it is the tasting, and I'll explain why in a moment. I think the smelling of the honey is something that is a little bit unusual for people, because they've never thought up to this point that, to try and smell honey. But yeah, so first we would look at it. So when you're looking at it, you're looking at the color, you're looking if it's liquid honey, how transparent, how clear it is. If it's crystallized honey, you're looking at how homogeneous it is. And obviously you're looking for cleanliness as well, which is very, very important when we're talking about competition. If you can see anything at all in the honey that should not be there, any foreign particles, if you can see them before you're submitting, we will see them as well, okay? And do not submit them. Foam, bubbles, signs of fermentation, these are all things that we can see. The visual part has the least points in the evaluation process, okay? Then the second one is olfactory, so we're smelling. So to be able to smell the honey better, and this is for those that want to try this process at home as well, we take a spoon and we smear the honey on the glass or on the cup that we're tasting out of. That helps to kind of open the honey. With wine, you can swirl, right, the glass, or with mead as well. With honey, you just use a spoon and you smear. So we're smelling it. And then we're tasting it. I think the tasting part is the most difficult, because you have multiple things happening at the same time. Okay, so we are evaluating, we're describing the basic tastes, which is perhaps the easiest part. So your basic tastes: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. And yes, you can find all of those in honey as well. Then we're looking at the actual aromas. Okay, so the basic taste was the tongue. The aromas is actually your nose working. It's just that it works through the retronasal, so the smell molecules go up and then reach your nose from the back of the mouth. So this is your notes that we are describing. And then we're also looking how those notes change, how long they linger, whether they change, if it's a flat profile, whether they change, whether there's an aftertaste. So an aftertaste is something that initially you didn't detect but comes out later on. We're also looking if there's any other sensations of meaning in the scientific term. I mean, these are not, in general language, we call them tastes, but technically they're not. So that's metallic sensation, cooling sensation, spiciness, or hot food, that kind of spiciness, I mean. And we're also evaluating texture. So again, this is something that people don't normally pay attention to when they're trying honey. But if you do try at home, you can actually tell, the size, the solubility of the crystals, whether even the shape, if they're round, if they're rough, if they're different sizes, if some of them take longer to melt. And then we're also obviously paying attention to the overall impression, basically. Is that clear? You want me to elaborate on some parts?
It is clear, but what exactly you're looking in aromas? What's the positive and what's the negative when you get honey sample?
Okay, so we begin with description. Okay, so the evaluation kind of is secondary, I would say. First is to describe it, because again, we're not, unless it's something that shouldn't really be there, that like a foreign odor, and then by foreign odor, most common ones will be, you can smell fermentation, but fermentation, for you to smell it, it has to be quite advanced, so you probably also see it. It can be contamination by smoke. So this is immediately something extremely negative. If it's not that, then first you describe. And then when you're talking about the evaluation, again, depends whether it's monofloral or whether it's polyfloral. If it's monofloral, we're looking whether we're going to have the same description that would match the standard. So there, the intensity, whether all the notes that we're looking are there or not, if there are some notes that shouldn't be in the standard that are there. When we're talking about the polyfloral honey, we're talking about the overall balance, whether it matches, again, the visual and the olfactory, let's say. So for example, if it's a very light honey and it's extremely intense and smells like buckwheat, or even if it's a light honey, but it very intensely smells of. So that's, I guess, the example there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah, I've got one.
Any more questions?
I wanted to ask that earlier, but I had no chance. It's very, to be honest, right? You can tell we haven't rehearsed it because you very often answer the question before we even ask it. But one of the things I wanted to ask is when you were mentioning about the monofloral honeys, and the obviously how they've got their own standards and all that. Is there any monoflorals which are not even pleasant to eat or to smell? Obviously, you mentioned buckwheat. Yes, we know buckwheat can be very strong. People are bringing in the barn, the animals, all that. Yes, I get it. And sometimes you got really pleasant buckwheat, sometimes you got like less pleasant buckwheat. But are there any monofloral varieties which are absolutely awful because they're like a bit? I know like some of the chestnuts can be very bitter. Some people struggle with linden. But have you come across some really unpleasant, but yet so into the standard, so into the description that they would smell any competition and won the gold, even though the consumer will absolutely hate to eat it or to buy it?
I don't. Okay, so this is a tough question in the sense that it's you're asking for two different things. One is my personal opinion, because when we're starting to use the words like pleasant or unpleasant, that's it. We're leaving the realm of objectivity.
Yeah, I know, and I'm sorry, but I kind of did it on purpose.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, I just want. This is the one thing that I want to, emphasize, that this is becoming subjective now. I can tell you, for example, I'm not the biggest fan of buckwheat. So for me, the kind of buckwheat that I like as a person, not as a honey judge, is the one that's milder and maybe mixed with sometimes with honeydew or something like that, kind of like diluted with something else. I enjoy it more. But if I am judging it, the one that is more intense and more animal is going to get better marks, because I'm leaving the subjectivity out the window. The one kind of that I can say that a lot of people take a very strong reaction to as well, and maybe not so well known for in Poland or Lithuania, is the strawberry tree honey. It's an Italian, but you can kind of find it around the Mediterranean, not just in Italy. Arbutus unedo. It's extremely bitter. To my knowledge, it's the most bitter honey variety that there is. It is so bitter to me because, again, bitterness, as you know, is kind of like people are sensitive to it at different levels. So, for example, my partner, he doesn't mind it so much. To me, it's so bitter. Just by smelling it, I know how bitter it will be. Like, I have learned to associate that smell with the bitterness, and I don't even want to taste it. It's that bitter to me,
But
yeah.
can you smell bitterness?
No, technically no. And this is why I use the words. I've learned to associate that smell with bitterness.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, because in general language, we do say something smells sour, something smells sweet, but it's not correct. I've seen some very interesting research concerning that honey. So it has the bitterness from this unique chemical. I think it's called unadin, if I'm not mistaken. So it's only found in the strawberry tree nectar, and then it kind of gets even more concentrated when it turns into honey. With those weird honeys, with those really extreme ones, if you just introduce it to the consumer, if you talk about it and you say to people, this variety, it's extremely bitter, it's the most bitter in the world, and blah blah. And I will say even my own personal opinion. If you just do that short introduction explaining that it's bitter, why it's bitter, that it's normal to find it there, the acceptance rate goes up 20%.
All right.
So this is also a very good example of how having the skill, and just by talking, to the consumer, how having the ability to describe your honey, even if it's a bit weirder, can actually find you the consumers that will like that kind of. It's just you need to find your kind of weird. We had a very good example as well with the bitterness this season from one beekeeper in Lithuania that works with the European dark bee. It was a forest honey, and it was quite bitter. And she had consumers who were buying each year, calling and saying what's going on. And honeydew sometimes can also be bitter, so it was quite normal. And then some people really liked it, and they said, we want to buy loads of it. But the ones who didn't expect it, they thought that there was something wrong with it, because they didn't do the communication, they didn't describe before selling to people. And then they opened expecting one thing, and they found the bitterness, and then, oh no, this is something bad. But if you tell, 20% more acceptance rate. So
brilliant. So just on that note with the strawberry tree, when we were last time in Italy with Mate, Alessandra, the president of the register, she actually gifted us a little sample of that honey, and I have to say, for me personally, it wasn't as bitter as I could accept it. It's gone now, by the way, right? It's been eaten. So just that. But anyway, it's a very, very, very last question because I'm conscious of the time. There's one which is, I think, quite important, and people will be really interested to know the answer. So if you could just take this one on, Rasa, and then we'll be wrap it up. So the last question is how to recognize the good honey in the shop, in the supermarket. And thanks, Molokoiska, for that question, by the way.
Okay, so I would. The one thing that I always tell people is the best honey you will not find in the shop, but directly at the beekeeper. Okay, that's the one thing. If you do go to the shop, at least the one thing that you want to make sure is don't just look at the front label where you're just going to have the word honey in big letters. At least check on the side, because if it says honey mixture or a mix of honeys from different sources, I would recommend to not buy that, because that's basically what that is. It's industrial honey, it's processed honey from different beekeepers or even different countries, different continents, just mixed into one blob, very often heated or pasteurized, homogenized. And it's really, to me, that kind of honey doesn't really have much terroir, doesn't really have much in the sensory department. And I would argue quality wise is also somewhat inferior. But if you do buy at the supermarket, so look for actual honey from a beekeeper. So if you're looking at producer, again, look at the side of the jar where you have the label and you want to see an actual name of the beekeeper that it came from, not some big company. And again, not that it says mix, but you want to actually be able to locate the producer in a very specific area. I think that's the easiest kind of thing to do. Just by looking at honey in the jar, you will be able to tell very little, right? And maybe if it's, I don't know, again, got some weird crystallization or something, you could be a little bit cautious, but color is not going to tell you anything. The label is not going to tell you much apart from that very little information that's about the producer. The best way is to buy directly from the beekeeper and to taste it, because the best honey is going to be the one that you're going to enjoy the most. Let's put it this way.
Brilliant.
Okay, but about crystallization, if we go to the shop and middle of winter, December, January, as we still see the running honey, that should be first sign that we shouldn't take that honey to home if you want a good quality product, because otherwise it's not really honey or be overheated, so it's just sweet substance in the jar. Yeah, I'm correct.
Unless with acacia.
That's what I was going to say. So first of all, it depends where you are, right? So you will have certain varieties that will stay liquid longer. Honeydew as well. So if it's dark honey, very likely it could just be honeydew, for example. So you never know by looking at it again. And then if you look at the law, at the regulation, technically, there's nothing that prevents, that bans heating or pasteurizing honey. The issue is to do it properly. But this is another very broad topic of what actually is quality honey, because you can go by the basic quality standards set by European Union. You can go by your own personal standards, because some people are going to say, yes, to me quality honey is the one that stays liquid longer, and somebody will say, I want the kind of hard tough honey that you can cut with knife, and these are personal preferences as much as a quality issue. When we're talking about the competition, again, we're looking for the best of the best. We're looking for very different quality descriptions.
Cool.
So yeah, know your honey, know your producer as much as possible. That's the best way.
I know, Chris, you promised the last question, but I have another one. I believe our viewers will forgive us if we go for a little bit longer. Could you tell beekeepers why they should send honey to the competition? Just for medals or any other reason? Why?
I think the most valuable part to me, I would argue, yes, the medal is a nice thing to have, but the feedback that you get is probably even more valuable. The description, the understanding, the deeper understanding of your own product that you get from someone experienced, multiple someone's experienced evaluating it is a really big bonus. And I think if we're talking on a kind of a more bigger collective mission level, shall we say, or the idea of promoting honey overall, which is important to us organizing the competition, but it's important to mead makers who want, high quality product as the raw material for making mead, and it's very important for the beekeepers themselves. So I think uh, just by participating and by having the competition, by us, all of us spreading the knowledge about quality honey is a very important step in actually the consumer understanding much more about honey and valuing it much more. So it's, you have that immediate benefit to me is not just the medal but the feedback, but also this long-term benefit, the bigger one, the bigger picture benefit, like I like to say, is just um, strengthening the culture of quality honey in Europe.
And I think if beekeeper is well, I would like said smart, the feedback could be used as a great marketing volume as well. You guys gonna get great feedback from professional, from people who not around your area, so it's quite objective opinion, and you can use it that to sell more honeys or more expensive honey to your customers. For from my knowledge, I know one beekeeper who won medal. I think was 2 years ago, and guess which honey was faster seller for him? It was the one with medal, because average customer come to the beekeeper and ask for honey. It's work, you see the medal from some competition, you can easily sell that honey a little bit more expensive and guarantee people will go to that one. Of course, it's some personal preference as well, and maybe if that medal was on a buckwheat or linden honey and the customer don't like it, they still gonna choose something different. But mostly, if you're smart enough, you can use it for your marketing purposes.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So, Rasa, the very last thing I'm going to ask you is not a question. It's not a question, right? In 1 minute, how will you advertise? How will you convince people to submit to enter their honeys into Honey Madness Cup? Literally in a nutshell, in like 1 minute.
It's kind of repeating myself, but
Yeah.
honestly, like what Mate said, it's an opportunity to have your honey evaluated, to better the quality of your product, to get the tools and the actual words that you can use to communicate about your product, to have a marketing advantage. To certainly, if you come to the Mead Makers conference and to the award ceremony, to connect with like-minded people. It's an opportunity for you to get exposure, perhaps from mead makers. Again, if we're looking for quality honey, the benefits go on and on. And again, this is the most important to me. Long-term benefit is for us all to kind of contribute to building a stronger quality honey culture in Europe.
Great, fantastic. So just to wrap it up very quickly, Honey Madness Cup is open for registration. You can visit our website, which is honeymadnesscup.com. Registration ends on the 19th of December this year. This is due to the logistic of the competition. We will then wait for your samples till, let me just have a quick look, the 9th of January. This is when your samples need to be received in our warehouse. and then the whole evaluation will happen, and the results will be announced on a conference on the last day, which is 21st of February. So if you haven't, or if you're still thinking about it, or if you haven't entered yet, do it. Don't wait till the very last minute. As Rasa said, it's your meat's gonna, your honey is going to be evaluated by the most competent people in Europe. Even if you're not going to win a medal, you're going to receive a feedback which is invaluable. There's only benefits. There's only benefits.
And from my side, if you would like join us to the award ceremony and to European Meat Makers Conference, yes, you should do it that, because that's the place when you can taste and meet so many meat makers and taste meat from all over the world. So have a look on our website, registration forms for Meat Madness, Honey Madness, and European Meat Makers Conference that are all on. Don't wait till the last moment, because prices are cheaper when you register before end of this year. So that's it from me, guys. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Rasa, for being with us. That was amazing interview. We probably could chat much longer, but maybe next time. So thank you, and what, guys? We see you again.
See you soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye.
Take care. Bye bye now.
Bye.